The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine courtyard of Windsor Castle as 10-year-old Prince George walked quietly beside his grandfather, King Charles. The young prince had always been fascinated by the daily rituals of palace life, but today something felt different. His small hands were tucked behind his back, mimicking the formal posture he had observed in countless royal ceremonies. As they approached the main entrance, George noticed a familiar figure standing at attention. Guard Captain James Morrison had been protecting the royal family for over 15 years, his weathered face showing the dedication of countless hours spent in service. What George didn't know was that today marked Captain Morrison's final day before retirement. A secret the guard had kept to himself to avoid any unnecessary fuss. The captain's uniform was immaculate as always, his boots polished to a mirror shine that reflected the morning light. His rifle stood perfectly positioned, and his expression remained stoic despite the emotions churning within him. After decades of service, he had protected 3 generations of royals. Watching Prince George grow from a curious toddler into the thoughtful young man before him, George had always been drawn to Captain Morrison, often stealing glances at the guard during formal events. There was something about the man's quiet strength that commanded respect without demanding attention. The prince had noticed how Morrison's eyes would soften slightly whenever their gazes met. Though his professional demeanor never wavered, King Charles paused in his conversation with a palace aide, following his grandson's gaze toward the guard. He had received Morrison's retirement letter weeks ago and planned to hold a private ceremony later that afternoon. The king understood the weight of such transitions, knowing how these dedicated individuals became part of the palace family. The morning air carried the scent of blooming roses from the palace gardens, and the distant sound of London traffic created a gentle hum beyond the castle walls. George found himself studying Morrison's face, noting the small lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting into sunlight during outdoor ceremonies, and the subtle gray threading through his dark hair. Without warning, something stirred within the young prince. Perhaps it was an intuitive understanding that moments like these were fleeting, or maybe it was the lessons about respect and gratitude his parents had instilled in him. Whatever the reason, George felt compelled to acknowledge this man who had been a constant, reassuring presence throughout his childhood. The prince's steps slowed as they drew nearer to Morrison's position. His grandfather continued walking, engaged in discussion about the day's schedule, unaware that his grandson had fallen behind. George's heart began to beat faster as an idea formed in his mind. Something that felt both natural and necessary. He remembered the stories his grandmother had told him about showing appreciation to those who served with dedication. She had always emphasized that true nobility came not from titles or crowns, but from recognizing the worth and sacrifice of others. Those words echoed in his young mind as he made a decision that would surprise everyone present. The palace staff moved about their morning duties, some carrying fresh flowers for the staterooms, others preparing for the day's official functions. None of them noticed the small drama beginning to unfold between a young prince and a veteran guard, a moment that would soon capture the attention of everyone in the courtyard and ripple far beyond the castle walls. Prince George stopped walking entirely, his small frame straightening as he turned to face Captain Morrison directly. The guard's training kicked in immediately, his eyes remaining focused straight ahead despite noticing the young royal's movement in his peripheral vision. Years of discipline had taught him to maintain position regardless of distractions. Even when that distraction was a member of the family he protected, the prince took 3 measured steps toward Morrison, his polished shoes clicking softly against the stone courtyard. Other guards stationed nearby began to take notice, their own professional training creating a heightened awareness of any unusual activity involving the royal family. However, something in George's demeanor suggested this was not a moment for intervention. King Charles, still engaged in conversation 20 feet away, finally realized his grandson was no longer beside him. He turned to see George standing before Captain Morrison, the boy's expression serious beyond his years. The king's first instinct was to call his grandson back, but something in the scene made him pause. There was a gravity to the moment that deserved respect. George clasped his hands behind his back, mirroring the formal stance he had observed during countless military ceremonies. His voice, though still carrying the pitch of childhood, was clear and steady as he spoke. The words he chose were simple, yet they carried a weight that surprised everyone within earshot. Captain Morrison felt his composure waver for the first time in years. The young prince's unexpected attention and the sincerity in his voice created a moment that no amount of training had prepared him for. Behind his professional mask, emotions began to surface that he had carefully controlled throughout his career. The morning breeze stirred the royal standard flying above them, its fabric snapping gently in the wind. Palace staff, who had been going about their duties, began to slow their pace, sensing something significant was happening. A gardener paused in his pruning, a maid carrying fresh linen stopped at a window, and even the kitchen staff working near the service entrance found reasons to glance toward the courtyard. George's words were not grandiose or rehearsed. Instead, they came from a place of genuine appreciation that only a child could express so purely. He spoke about noticing Morrison's dedication, about feeling safe because of his presence, and about understanding that some people gave their whole lives to serve others. His vocabulary was that of a 10-year-old, but his sentiment was profound. The captain's eyes began to glisten, though he maintained his forward gaze. 15 years of protecting this family had been filled with moments of pride, duty, and quiet satisfaction. But nothing had prepared him for this simple acknowledgement from the youngest member of the royal household. The boy he had watched grow up was thanking him with a maturity that belied his age. Other guards in the courtyard found themselves deeply moved by the scene unfolding before them. Many had served for years without recognition beyond their paychecks and official commendations. To witness one of their own being honored so personally by a member of the royal family stirred something profound in each of them. King Charles felt his own emotions rising as he watched his grandson. The boy's actions reflected not just good breeding or royal protocol, but a genuine understanding of human dignity and service. These were lessons that couldn't be taught from books or formal instruction. They had to come from the heart. The entire courtyard had grown remarkably quiet, with only the distant sounds of the city and the gentle rustling of leaves breaking the silence. Even the palace dogs seemed to sense the importance of the moment, settling quietly rather than their usual playful barking. Everyone present understood they were witnessing something special. What happened next took everyone by complete surprise. Prince George, with the natural grace that seemed to flow through his royal bloodline, slowly lowered himself into a deep, respectful bow before Captain Morrison. The gesture was not the casual nod of acknowledgement typically exchanged between royals and staff, but a full, formal bow that spoke of genuine reverence and gratitude. The impact was immediate and profound. Captain Morrison's carefully maintained composure finally cracked, and tears began to stream down his weathered cheeks. In 15 years of service, through countless ceremonies, state visits, and formal occasions, he had never experienced anything like this moment. A member of the royal family, a future king, was bowing to him. The other guards in the courtyard stood transfixed. Some felt their own eyes beginning to water as they witnessed this extraordinary display of respect. In their world of rigid hierarchy and protocol, seeing a prince honor one of their own created a moment that would be remembered and retold for years to come. The gesture transcended all boundaries of rank and position. Palace staff, who had gathered to witness the scene, felt their hearts swell with emotion. The head gardener, who had worked at the palace for 20 years, later said he had never seen anything so moving in all his time there. A young maid whispered to her colleague that she finally understood what true nobility meant, and it had nothing to do with titles or bloodlines. King Charles felt immense pride watching his grandson. The boy had not been coached or instructed in this moment. His actions came from his own understanding of honor and respect. The king realized that all the lessons about duty, service, and appreciation had taken root in the young prince's heart in ways that formal education never could have achieved. Captain Morrison, despite his tears, maintained his position as much as possible. His training ran so deep that even in this emotional moment his body remained largely at attention. However, His hands trembled slightly, and his breathing had become uneven. The overwhelming nature of the prince's gesture had broken through decades of professional restraint. The bow lasted only seconds, but its impact was eternal. When Prince George finally straightened, his own eyes were bright with emotion. He looked directly into Captain Morrison's face, no longer observing protocol that discouraged direct eye contact between royals and guards. In that moment, they were simply two people sharing a profound human connection. The silence in the courtyard was so complete that the sound of a single bird singing in the palace gardens seemed amplified. Even the usual bustle of London traffic appeared to have paused in respect for this remarkable scene. Time itself seemed suspended as everyone present absorbed the magnitude of what they had witnessed. Word began to spread quickly through the palace corridors. Kitchen staff, housekeepers, and administrative personnel began making their way toward windows and doorways, drawn by whispered accounts of the extraordinary event taking place in the courtyard. Each person who witnessed the scene would carry the memory with them forever. The moment represented everything the royal family aspired to embody: service, humility, respect, and recognition of the dignity in every person's contribution. Prince George's instinctive understanding of these values, demonstrated through such a simple yet powerful gesture, showed wisdom far beyond his 10 years. Captain Morrison's career had been defined by protecting others and remaining invisible, but in this moment he felt truly seen and valued. The prince's bow acknowledged not just his service, but his humanity and the sacrifices he had made throughout his career. It was a gift more precious than any medal or commendation could ever be. The emotional weight of the moment became too much for Captain Morrison to bear while maintaining his post. For the first time in his distinguished career, the veteran guard made a decision that went against his training. With tears still flowing freely down his face, he slowly and deliberately stepped down from his ceremonial position. The sound of his boots touching the courtyard stone seemed to echo through the silence. Morrison's movement was careful and measured, showing respect for the moment while acknowledging that something fundamental had shifted. His rifle was lowered with the same precision he had maintained throughout his service. Though his hands shook with emotion, Prince George watched with wide eyes as the guard stepped down. The boy understood intuitively that he had witnessed something unprecedented. Throughout his young life, he had seen guards remain motionless, regardless of weather, ceremony length, or any other circumstance. Morrison's decision to step down felt like a profound acknowledgement of their shared moment. King Charles felt his breath catch in his throat. He understood the significance of Morrison's action better than anyone else in the courtyard. For a royal guard to step down from his post required extraordinary circumstances, and his grandson's gesture had created exactly that. The king realized this moment would become part of palace legend, passed down through generations of staff and family members. Other guards throughout the courtyard began to feel the ripple effects of Morrison's decision. While they maintained their own positions, the emotional impact of witnessing their colleagues' response created an unprecedented atmosphere. Some wiped away tears while trying to remain at attention, their professional training warring with their human emotions. Morrison's face, now clearly visible as he stood before Prince George, showed the full weight of 15 years of dedicated service. His weathered features told stories of countless hours standing guard, of missed family gatherings, of sacrifices made in service to the crown. The prince's recognition had brought all of those memories to the surface. The captain's voice, when he finally spoke, was thick with emotion but filled with gratitude. His words were simple, expressing his honor at having served the royal family and his deep appreciation for Prince George's acknowledgement. The formality of his speech could not hide the genuine emotion behind each carefully chosen word. Palace staff continued to gather at windows and doorways, drawn by the extraordinary scene unfolding in the courtyard. Many of them had worked alongside Morrison for years, sharing meals, holidays, and countless shifts together. Seeing their colleague receive such recognition from Prince George filled them with pride and emotion. The young prince listened intently to Morrison's words, his expression serious and focused. Despite his age, he seemed to understand the gravity of the moment and the impact his simple gesture had created. His parents' lessons about treating everyone with dignity and respect had manifested in this spontaneous act of appreciation. A gentle breeze stirred through the courtyard, carrying with it the scent of roses from the palace gardens. The royal standard continued to flutter overhead, a reminder of the traditions and protocols that governed palace life. Even as this moment transcended all conventional boundaries, King Charles began to approach his grandson and the retired guard, recognizing that this extraordinary moment called for his presence. As the reigning monarch, he understood the importance of acknowledging what had just transpired between Prince George and Captain Morrison. The gathering crowd of palace staff remained respectfully quiet, understanding that they were witnessing something historic. Years later, many would tell their families about the day Prince George honored the palace guard with such genuine respect that the man stepped down from his post in overwhelming gratitude. King Charles reached his grandson and Captain Morrison, just as the emotional intensity of the moment began to settle into something deeper and more profound. The monarch's presence added a new dimension to the scene, transforming what had been a personal exchange between a boy and a guard into something that would resonate throughout the entire royal household. With characteristic grace, King Charles placed a gentle hand on Prince George's shoulder, his touch conveying both pride and approval. The king's eyes met those of Captain Morrison, and in that glance, years of mutual respect and understanding passed between them. Charles had always valued Morrison's service, but seeing his grandson recognize it so spontaneously filled him with immense satisfaction. The king spoke quietly, his words carrying across the silent courtyard with clarity and warmth. He acknowledged Morrison's years of faithful service and expressed his own gratitude for the guard's dedication. More importantly, he praised Prince George for his instinctive understanding of honor and his willingness to show appreciation when it was deserved. Captain Morrison straightened slightly, his military bearing returning even as emotion continued to shine in his eyes. Being acknowledged by both the current king and the future one created a moment he knew would remain with him for the rest of his life. His retirement, which had loomed as an ending, suddenly felt like a celebration of a life well lived. The other guards in the courtyard found themselves standing a little taller, their chests swelling with pride, not just for their colleague, but for their profession. Prince George's gesture and the king's words had elevated their service beyond mere duty, recognizing it as something noble and worthy of royal appreciation. Palace staff, who had gathered to witness the scene, felt a renewed sense of purpose in their own roles. Kitchen workers, housekeepers, groundskeepers, and administrators all understood that their contributions mattered in ways they might never have fully appreciated before. The prince's actions had created a ripple effect that touched everyone present. Prince William and Catherine, who had been informed of the developing situation, arrived in time to witness the conclusion of this remarkable scene. They watched with pride as their son demonstrated the values they had worked so hard to instill in him. Seeing George act with such maturity and compassion confirmed their belief in his developing character. The prince's younger siblings, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, would later hear the story of their brother's actions, and it would become part of the family's oral history. The tale would be retold at family gatherings, serving as an example of how royalty should conduct themselves, and the importance of recognizing others' contributions. News of the incident began to spread beyond the palace walls through staff members who shared the story with their families and friends. Social media posts from palace employees, carefully worded to respect privacy while sharing the inspiring moment, began to circulate. The story resonated with people around the world who were hungry for examples of genuine human kindness. Captain Morrison's retirement ceremony, originally planned as a small, private affair, was elevated to something more significant. The king decided that Morrison's service and Prince George's recognition deserved broader acknowledgement within the palace community. Plans were made for a proper celebration that would honor both the guard's career and the prince's demonstration of royal values. The veteran guard found himself surrounded by colleagues and staff members who wanted to congratulate him and share their own appreciation for his years of service. The barrier that typically separated different levels of palace hierarchy seemed to dissolve in the warmth of the moment, creating connections that had never existed before. Prince George, still processing the magnitude of what had occurred, remained close to his grandfather and Captain Morrison. The boy's actions had created something beautiful and meaningful, teaching him valuable lessons about the power of recognition and the importance of treating everyone with dignity and respect. The story of Prince George's gesture began to spread far beyond the palace walls, capturing the imagination of people around the world. Within hours, carefully released details of the incident appeared in news outlets, social media platforms, and conversations in homes across the globe. The image of a young prince bowing to a veteran guard touched hearts everywhere, reminding people of the power of simple human kindness. Captain Morrison, now officially retired, found himself at the center of an outpouring of support and admiration from strangers who had been moved by the story. Letters and messages poured into the palace from veterans, active military personnel, and civilians who wanted to thank him for his service and express their appreciation for Prince George's recognition of his dedication. The incident sparked conversations about respect, service, and the true meaning of nobility across dinner tables and classrooms worldwide. Teachers used the story to illustrate lessons about character and citizenship, while parents pointed to Prince George as an example of how young people could make a difference through simple acts of kindness and recognition. Palace staff noticed a change in atmosphere following the remarkable morning. The usual hierarchy and formality remained, but there was a new warmth in interactions between different levels of employees. The prince's gesture had reminded everyone that their contributions were valuable and appreciated, regardless of their position within the organization. Prince George himself began to understand the broader impact of his actions as his parents explained how the story was being received around the world. The boy was both surprised and pleased that his simple expression of gratitude had resonated with so many people. It reinforced his understanding of the responsibility that came with his royal position. King Charles used the incident as a teaching moment for his entire family, discussing how authentic gestures of appreciation could have profound impacts on individuals and communities. The story became part of the royal family's ongoing education about their role in society and the importance of leading by example. Captain Morrison's retirement party became a celebration not just of his service, but of the values demonstrated that morning in the courtyard. Former colleagues, current staff, and members of the royal family gathered to honor both his dedication and the young prince who had recognized it. The event was filled with laughter, tears, and stories of a career dedicated to protecting others. Media coverage of the story emphasized the positive aspects of the monarchy and its relationship with the people who served it. Editorial writers praised Prince George's maturity and the royal family's approach to raising their children with strong moral values. The incident provided a refreshing contrast to more negative royal news stories. Schools across the United Kingdom began incorporating the story into their citizenship curricula, using it to discuss themes of respect, gratitude, and service to others. Students wrote essays and created artwork inspired by Prince George's actions, exploring what it meant to show appreciation for people who often went unrecognized. The veteran guard found himself invited to speak at military events and schools, sharing his experiences and discussing the importance of duty and service. His story, intertwined with Prince George's gesture, became a powerful tool for inspiring young people to consider careers in public service and to appreciate those who dedicated their lives to protecting others. International reactions to the story were overwhelmingly positive, with foreign media outlets praising both Prince George's character and the royal family's values. The incident became a soft diplomatic tool, enhancing Britain's reputation abroad and demonstrating the continued relevance of the monarchy in modern society. The palace began receiving requests from organizations wanting to honor both Prince George and Captain Morrison for their role in creating such an inspiring moment. while most were politely declined to maintain privacy. The offers reflected the global impact of their simple, authentic interaction. Months after the extraordinary morning in the palace courtyard, the impact of Prince George's gesture continued to resonate throughout the royal household and beyond. The story had evolved from a single moment of recognition into a lasting symbol of the values that defined true leadership and nobility. The young prince had unknowingly set a new standard for how royalty could connect with those who served them. Captain Morrison settled into retirement with a sense of fulfillment he had never expected. The recognition he received from Prince George had transformed his perspective on his career, helping him understand that his years of service had been meaningful in ways he had never fully appreciated. He spent his days gardening, visiting old friends, and occasionally speaking to groups about duty and service. The Palace Guard unit established an informal tradition of sharing Morrison's story with new recruits, using it to illustrate the honor inherent in their profession. Young guards learned that their service was not invisible, that their dedication could be seen and appreciated by those they protected. The story became part of the unit's culture, inspiring excellence and pride in their work. Prince George continued to demonstrate the values he had shown that morning, regularly acknowledging staff members and showing interest in their contributions to palace life. His parents were pleased to see that his actions had not been a single incident, but rather a reflection of his developing character. The boy's natural inclination toward gratitude and respect became more pronounced as he grew older. The incident influenced how the entire royal family interacted with their staff and security personnel. Family members made more effort to acknowledge individual contributions and express appreciation for the dedication shown by those who worked to support them. The palace atmosphere became warmer and more personal while maintaining its professional standards. Educational institutions continued to use the story as a teaching tool, helping students understand concepts of leadership, respect, and civic responsibility. The tale of Prince George and Captain Morrison appeared in textbooks and lesson plans, inspiring young people to consider how they might make positive impacts through simple acts of kindness and recognition. International visitors to the palace often asked to hear the story during their tours, and guides took pleasure in recounting the details of that remarkable morning. The incident had become part of the palace's living history, a moment that exemplified the best qualities of both the royal family and British society. Captain Morrison occasionally returned to the palace for special events, always receiving warm welcomes from former colleagues and royal family members. During these visits, he often encountered Prince George, and their conversations reflected the genuine friendship that had developed from their shared moment. The prince always showed interest in Morrison's retirement activities and continued to treat him with the respect that had characterized their first meaningful interaction. The story inspired similar gestures around the world, as other young people began looking for ways to recognize and appreciate those who serve their communities. Teachers, police officers, firefighters, and military personnel found themselves receiving unexpected thanks from children who had heard about Prince George's example and wanted to follow it. Years later, as Prince George grew toward adulthood, he would often reflect on that morning as a defining moment in his understanding of leadership and responsibility. The genuine emotion of Captain Morrison's response had taught him about the power of recognition and the importance of seeing the humanity in every person who crossed his path. The legacy of that quiet morning in the palace courtyard lived on in countless small acts of kindness and appreciation that rippled outward from the original moment. Prince George's instinctive gesture of respect had created something far greater than anyone could have imagined, proving that the most profound changes often began with the simplest acts of human recognition and gratitude. The story became a reminder that true nobility was not about titles or positions, but about the courage to acknowledge others and the wisdom to understand that everyone's contribution mattered. In a world often divided by differences, the image of a young prince bowing to a veteran guard offered hope that respect and gratitude could bridge any gap.